This is Christine. She's just walked 60 kilometers to get medicines to stop her and her newborn baby becoming sick with AIDS. Her husband died 3 months ago. Despite very effective medicines, 3 people still die of AIDS every minute in Africa. This is the story of research being done by doctors to try to make it easier for people like Christine to get treatment. My name is Anne. 6 years ago, all of us now singing and dancing were dying of AIDS. But we were lucky. We are among the first in Africa to receive free medicines. By taking these medicines every day, we can be healthy. And we now dedicate ourselves to fighting this terrible disease, taking our message to the community. Just as important, we've been taking part in medical research, which is vital if doctors are to bring treatment to the millions of people who still need it. This is the story of the DART clinical trial, which I joined in 2003. DART is the largest HIV/AIDS treatment trial ever carried out in Africa. It's an experiment designed to find safe, cheap, and simple ways of using life-saving medicines on our continent. DART has given new life to people like me, and I hope the knowledge it gives to doctors will help many more, because knowledge is our best weapon in the battle against AIDS, a battle which we are still a long way from winning. It was 17 years ago that I first made this journey to my husband's village. It's not a happy memory. My husband had just died. We lived in Kampala, but his family wanted to bury him in the village where he had grown up, in the hills above Nebi in northwestern Uganda. I did not know then that AIDS had killed him. His death certificate said pneumonia and meningitis. The doctor only told me the truth when I got back to Kampala. He urged me to get tested for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. But I refused. I did not feel ill. And what was the point? Back in 1991, no treatment existed. I remember being afraid. I had 3 children, the youngest just a baby. I could not believe what was happening. Many here in the village did not believe it either. Rumors spread that I had used witchcraft to kill my husband. For many years, I did not visit. Then in 2000, I started to get sick with convulsions and seizures at night. I had terrible nightmares of death, of dead bodies being thrown into pits, horrible things like that. 4 of my brothers and sisters, half our family, had already died of AIDS. When I tested positive for HIV, my family thought I would be the next. When I think of everyone this epidemic has taken, I often wonder why I had the chance to survive. I told you. AIDS has caused so much devastation. My husband's parents should be resting in their old age. but there are so many orphans, so many mouths to feed.
How are you?
One of the aims of the DART trial is to make it easier to bring the treatment which saved my life to villages like this. If this happens, then I'll be very happy at the small part which I have played. At the time I started to get sick, I remember reading how medicines had been found in wealthy countries to treat AIDS. People there were coming back from the brink of death to live normal lives. These medicines, called anti-retrovirals or ARVs, were first used effectively against the AIDS virus around 1995. They are not a cure and need to be taken for life. They suppress the virus, stopping AIDS from developing. But at that time, ARVs treatment cost tens of thousands of dollars. Very few Africans could buy them.
Thousands of our people were dying in our hands on virtually daily basis. We couldn't help them, yet we knew treatment that could have helped them existed. This is a very agonizing situation for any doctor to have the knowledge that would save his patients and yet cannot access the means to be able to practice his profession to save lives. It took far too long to make treatment accessible to Africa. It was far too long. In that period, hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. But because of commercial interests, these lives, perhaps running in millions, were lost. The medicines were not the only expense. Patients in wealthy countries on ARVs also have laboratory blood tests every few months. Some check for side effects and measure the levels of the virus in the body. One test, called a CD4 count, checks the strength of the body's defenses. It counts defensive cells known as CD4 cells. This is how the virus kills, by destroying our immune system, which protects us from disease. These tests help doctors check if a patient needs to switch to a different medicine. But they are expensive and require sophisticated laboratories available only in cities in Africa. We wondered how necessary they really are. And it's ultimately going to give you... Discussions started between the Medical Research Council in London and African research centers way back in 1998. Given the catastrophic AIDS situation in Africa, we wanted to find simpler and cheaper ways to use ARVs. At that time, many experts were saying that it would be unsafe to use the medicines without doing routine laboratory tests. Doctors working on the ground knew this would in practice mean not treating millions of people.
Clearly, if this was a requirement, it would be impossible in the African scenario, given that laboratories were not available in rural areas or smaller towns, And this was very frustrating. And this is how the design of the DART study was conceived.
DART stands for the Development of Anti-Retroviral Therapy in Africa. It was set up as a partnership between research institutes in Uganda, Zimbabwe, and London. 3 pharmaceutical companies donated drugs. A 4th company joined later. The trial was designed to answer the question, how safe is it to treat with antiretroviral medicines without routine laboratory testing?
It's still an incredibly important question today because millions of people still aren't receiving treatment, and furthermore those are often in more remote areas where there just aren't resources or facilities for doing lab testing. So bringing treatment to where people live is really important because in villages and remote areas they're still dying of HIV.
One can see the potential of that across northern Uganda. This is like so much of Africa. The distances are vast, the roads are often impassable, and there is still fear after a long civil war. I have come to a district called Patongo, where about 14% of people are HIV positive. At the new HIV clinic, some regular blood tests are done to monitor treatment, but samples have to be taken to a lab 4 hours drive away for analysis, and many villagers have to walk long distances to do the tests.
It is really, really challenging because sometimes you find that patients have to walk on the days we bleed them 60 kilometers, 50 kilometers. So those who can't walk those distances, those ones we can't do anything.
I'm amazed at the effort people make to get here. Christine gave birth to her 6th child just a week ago. Now carrying her baby, she has just walked for 60 kilometers to see the doctor.
It takes me 2 days to get here and 2 days to get back. I ask for shelter to sleep on the way, but there is often no food for me. It is very difficult, but I do this because I want to get treatment and be healthy so that I can look after my children. My eldest boy, who is 12, is looking after the others while I'm away. I worry whether he will prepare them food.
Did she receive any drugs? Is she taking ARVs?
In fact, this is the 2nd time Christine has made the journey. She came when she was pregnant and did her CD4 count to see if she needed to go on treatment. She should have returned 2 weeks later to get the results, but she did not because her husband fell badly sick with AIDS and died. Christine called her baby Odongo, which means child born after his father's death. She says many in her village need treatment.
I try to persuade them to come for treatment, but they find it very difficult to travel this far. Some have died because of this. My sister-in-law died recently. She knew she was HIV positive, but she was very weak. She could not get to the clinic to do the tests and get treatment.
The obvious solution is to take the medicines to the villages. Dr. Bass is planning to start mobile clinics. But if he has to do regular blood tests, this will make it more expensive and difficult. He hopes the DART trial will show it is safe to treat with less testing.
That would be a very significant study if it turns out to be like that, because then it would mean that patients don't have to move so frequent to the center for bleeding. You can take them drugs to where they are, meaning now it is more flexible. It is more flexible and more people will enroll.
Christine is now collecting her first set of ARVs before the long walk home. She will have to come back every 6 months to do further blood tests. There are very few single mothers of 6 children who would be strong or brave enough to set out on regular journeys like this, walking through the bush in the middle of the rains. The problems Christine faces show very clearly why it has been so difficult to get treatment to all those who need it on our continent.
Akawuka kaleeta nyingi okukolola n'amayuta galuma ekisipi kyanuma abange si kitenda ono sirimu yengaluma.
I was one of the 3,300 people in Uganda and Zimbabwe who joined the clinical trial, all of us in advanced stages of AIDS. The way scientists went about finding out if it is safe to treat without laboratory tests was to divide us by chance into two groups. All of us get tested every 3 months, just like in the US and Europe, but only one group sees their test results.
CD4's November 2008 were 522. Yes. And it has increased from last time. Because last time
I am in that group, so both I and my doctor see my CD4 count.
yes. That means your immune system is getting restored.
Breathe in. Breathe out.
But Vincent is in the second group. He doesn't see his test results, and more importantly, neither does his doctor. This is the whole point of the experiment, to see if doctors can treat without laboratories. So Dr. Ben has for 6 years been monitoring half his patients clinically, using simple clinical examinations to check for side effects and whether the drugs are working.
You're doing well, taking your drugs properly. Your drugs are working very well. So despite the fact that we cannot see your results, we don't have any concern.
The information from every visit and test is then put into computers. It is checked before being sent to London, where it is checked again. Statisticians in London are now analyzing all this data. By looking at the health of everyone in the two groups over 6 years, they can show if clinical monitoring is as safe as using tests.
What we will do is we will compare the group who get regular laboratory tests with the group who are monitored mainly clinically. And by comparing those two groups, we'll be able to say whether they are the same, which is what we hope, or whether actually one group's doing slightly better or slightly worse.
Dr. Ben clearly hopes the results will show testing is not necessary.
I mean, out there, we don't have the facilities to do the CD4 counts. We don't have the personnel to do the CD4 counts, but the drugs are available. So if we find that you don't need these results to treat, then if I'm a doctor, I'm in a village and I have the drugs and this trial has shown it works, wow, I'll be free to treat my patients comfortably. Right now, there's a lot of apprehension. You cannot do that. So it's very, very, very important.
Baboza mama mu lusuku nti mama baana baabo wadde ng'olaba nnyirira naye mu butuufu ngenda nakubuuza mwana wange ekikwogeza ekyo ki kyova omugamba kati ti maama nze nagwa mu batemu ese tabuse ffe tulabya abavubuka bato tuti tutambulira mu maziga tuli mu biwoobe wuuwi twazza gwaki twebuuza kyogutubonyabonya guti ayi mukama katonda saasira tomalawo sodoma.
Many who joined that were close to death. When Vincent Otil went into a coma in a hospital in Entebbe, those looking after him thought he had died. They wanted to take the body away.
On the 22nd of August 2003, the information spread to all the churches in Entebbe, and even over the radio, it was announced that I had died. I am a Catholic myself. In the Catholic Church, my name was read during the Mass. It was a doctor who refused to release my body. Then after 2 days, I woke up. Then I asked directly for black tea.
This scent comes from a village in eastern Uganda.
When the news was broken to the village that I died, the traditional way was taken. These people started collecting firewood in order to make a fire which the people who are coming to mourn the dead body would gather around to keep themselves warm. They didn't tell the mother directly, my mother, but she sensed that there was something wrong. But later on, these mobile phones, someone rang from there this way that, the man has risen from the dead. Up to now, I still think that if I died, where would these people go? My mother would not manage. I have 6 children. She would not manage. My mother would have even died long ago because of thoughts, not sickness, but worries.
Vincent believes joining DART saved his life, but he says he understood clearly he was joining a clinical trial, an experiment, and not a treatment program.
There's nothing bad with that, because if I had not taken any trial, I don't think whether I would be speaking to you right now. I would have died long ago. I entered freely. I understood what was happening, how many times they would take the blood, how many visits I would make in a month. Such things were detailed. I read all.
Some did have doubts about joining a clinical trial. By the time Peter joined DART, he had lost his job and all his money. His friends and family wanted him to travel to the village to die. But even knowing he was close to death, some of them found the idea of him joining a clinical trial even more disturbing.
A number of friends were discouraging me to join the study. They said that they are going to study, they are going to do a research on your life, trying medication on your life, so you don't know the counter reaction of these drugs. You might die, this drug might kill you. But I said, they've been planning to take me to the village to die there. Better access medication, try the luck which is there, than going to the village and die in the village like a person who has never gone to school. So I accepted to do the research on my life.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, dati ya manje sana kwagala. Hallelujah, katonda jali. Hallelujah, katonda jali. Sana kwagala. Hallelujah, katonda jali. Hallelujah, katonda manje sana kwagala. Aloganu naita katonda. Hallelujah, katonda jali. Sana kwagala. Ngo baroka ito mutonzi. Hallelujah, katonda manje sana kwagala. Galogala luimba lunyumire. Hallelujah, dati wa manje sana kwagala. Galogala luimba lunyumire. Hallelujah, dati wa manje sana kwagala. Ngoma ngoma basinyi betale. Hallelujah.
I remember when I first started ARVs, wondering whether they would work, and then the wonderful feeling of getting better. It is perhaps this which makes the experience of DART so unique. Many of us believed death was close, and then we were given a second chance. This can really change a person. It was a very exciting time for everyone on DART.
We had a very sick community of patients, and a good number of them were in and out of hospital a number of times in the first 3 to 6 months of the study, the first year. And just watching them come from that and getting better, to be able to experience firsthand the kinds of lives turning around that is a result of having anti-retrovirals is it's a rare privilege.
We have a patient that was literally carried on a stretcher. They couldn't walk, but a few months down the road of treatment, the person could walk. We have people, they had announced they're dead, and they are treated and they're still alive 6 years down the road. So it sort of causes a lot of excitement, causes a lot of joy, and gives you reason to treat people the next day.
But the early months were also the most critical. For some, treatment came too late. For others, the worst was not yet over. In 2004, Peter suddenly became very sick with anemia and secondary infections.
That time it was very serious. I was admitted. I was in a coma for 21 days. I was on a life support machine also for some time, and then I did survive it. Many times I tell my friends that I cheated death that time.
All that patients get free health care. But just as important, all the information gathered from cases like his was used to learn wider lessons. A sub-study of that was set up to find out more about the risks of anemia.
What we found in that was that patients who had some background anemia before they started their ARVs, patients who had a low body mass index, those kinds of patients were more likely to develop anemia. And then the study showed us who could predict the most likely episodes of anemia. So that was quite good.
More than 15 sub-studies have been set up on that, looking at different aspects of caring for those taking ARVs. The knowledge has been important for the mass treatment programs which started after that. But for Peter, being in a clinical trial also had disadvantages. Neither he nor his doctor sees his CD4 results. As he recovered, he found this very difficult.
I became very inquisitive. I wanted to know my CD4 count. So I had to go and get my CD4 count in a private laboratory in town. I did not tell the doctors because I knew they would not allow me. I did it privately.
Peter only did this once, not enough to affect the outcome of the trial, but his curiosity was not unique.
There are quite a number that have found it a challenge, especially when they have their colleagues. They are seated in the same area and the colleague is saying, my CD4 is so much. And for him, he doesn't know his CD4. They'll come into your office and they'll say, but doctor, I might be sick, my skin is itching, what is the problem? So it has been a bit of a challenge for people who get side effects. But over time, we've reassured them, and over time, they've seen their safety.
In fact, all clinical trials have safety nets. Blood tests for urgent conditions like anemia are immediately sent to the doctors if treatment is needed. And there is a monitoring group that sees the results of all the tests like CD4 counts. This committee can stop the trial if the data shows that one group is doing worse than the other. From earlier on, the trial had other important results. It showed, for instance, that people in Africa take drugs extremely well. This is important because otherwise the treatment fails. In the few cases where people did not take the medicines properly, sometimes the reasons were very different from the developed world. Peter started to notice this while waiting for clinics.
Some of my peers could see they are worn out, they're not adhering to the drugs, they are not coping with the drug. They keep on reducing and reducing. And others, some of them even died.
Some patients wrongly believed they could only take the medicines after eating. As they could buy only one meal a day, they missed some of their medicines. There was a strong sense of community on the trial. We spent a lot of time together, waiting to see nurses and doctors. Peter and other friends at the IDI decided to start an association to provide loans for those most in need to start small businesses. He took me to visit one of the founders of this group who lost her job because of the stigma she felt.
Everyone isolated me. They laughed behind my back. Like in the dining room, we are having lunch, they all stand up, they leave me at the table. No one actually wanted to come close to me. So I was in that state for 2.5 years. It was unbearable. So I felt I was psychologically tortured, I was stressed. All that forced me to resign.
There are men like her who fear saying publicly they are HIV positive. She worries she will not be able to sell her produce or get a job in the future. But others, like Peter, have found coming out in public has helped them.
I used to live very isolated, but as of now, people are coming to embrace me how I am. When I started disclosing, I saw people loving me. People who had developed sympathy of me. People used to advise me, they show me love, and and that's what every one of us is yearning for. People need to be loved. That's what I can tell you.
Who to tell about our status is a difficult decision everyone who is HIV positive has to face. Many more DAT patients have come out in public than on normal treatment programs. I believe it is the excellent support we receive from the staff and from each other that has given us the courage to take this step. As the pioneers of taking anti-retroviral therapy, DAT patients have often had a dramatic impact in their communities. Edward runs his own small school in a village outside Entebbe, but when he became sick with AIDS and TB, parents took their children away.
My appearance was shocking. I was not someone who you deserve to look at. Even other schools decampaigned me and saying that, you see now you are taking your children to that gentleman, he's going to die so soon. Now where will you take your children after that man when he dies? So the parents had to take action and take their children.
Edward was the first in the village to get anti-retroviral therapy.
Thank you very much. Clap for her. Nice.
His recovery had a dramatic impact on everyone. Parents started to bring their children back to his school.
They changed the attitude and wondering, how have I recovered? They couldn't believe it. There is nothing I did. It's only my appearance that persuaded them to bring back their children.
Others with AIDS soon joined DAT. There is now a strong HIV positive group in the village, which Edward coordinates, mostly made up of DAT patients. They run prevention campaigns, persuading people to get tested and counseling.
I'm happy to do this work. Today, things are different from when that started. Now people know when they test positive that treatment is available. There is no reason for them to go through all the sufferings that we went through. And I don't want people in this community to get sick like I did.
As pioneers, DAT patients faced many other issues as they recovered.
People have been sick, most of them have been laid off work. So suddenly they're okay, they need to look for jobs. They need to care for their children. The women who didn't have children want to have children. Those who didn't marry or get married want to marry suddenly. So there is a whole cascade of other issues that come up with better health.
The staff on that had to learn to deal with these issues, especially if they stopped people taking their medicines properly. It is the job of the counselors to make sure this does not happen. When I think of all the help I have had from them, I'm so grateful. They have helped me to deal with feelings of depression, anger and guilt. Depression especially can affect people taking their drugs.
There are so many causes, but we as counselors, we try to dig to find out what is exactly causing.
I myself felt deep sadness that I survived when so many others in my family died. It is much harder for parents whose children died of AIDS.
It is really bad because you feel you are the one who brought this thing to the child. So you feel guilty most of the time when you see the child has gone and for you, you got the treatment.
If people cannot get to the clinic, then Harriet goes to their home. She is taking me to see Christine, who found out she was HIV positive after her first child became very sick. He was a little boy. He was ill for much of his short life. Over the months, he slowly withered away. This is what happens to most babies if they don't get treatment, and at that time, medicines were not available. He died of AIDS at 15 months old. The loss left Christine deeply depressed. Like many in our culture, she believes she needs to have children to live on after her own death.
Nawulira bubi nnyo wanga yali omwana gwe nali nina yekka kale nga sirina na ssuubi lya kuddamu kuzaala ne mpulira nga ensi entamye mpulira sikyetegeera kale nga buli kyendaba mba sikyakyagala kirowoozo nakifuna lwa nsonga oba mu kalusha yaffe bagamba omuntu wabeera afa nga talina mwana simanyi bamuyitawa manju ekintu nakitya nnyo ate nga nolala njagala nnyo abaana nali njagala nnyo abaana nga wena bw'oli nga kutta omwana nga mpulira nnaku kati kwegamba nga nzirayo mu background nga nzijukira omwana nga yakola ki eyafa kati awo nga nange nina feeling ng'okola ki kuzaala omwana owange nga nze.
After joining DART and recovering, Christine decided to have a child. In fact, she has had 2 children while on DART. With the proper precautions, the risk of the baby being infected with the virus can be reduced enormously, but not eliminated. And getting pregnant also poses a risk for the mother.
We don't encourage people. That one is completely out because we know the disadvantages. We just give the information for them to decide what are the advantages of getting pregnancy when you have the HIV and what are the disadvantages. Which one outweighs the other? Then we leave it to them to make their own decision. It is their right.
More than 130 babies have been born to women on DART. This is natural. As people get better, they want to live normal lives, and having children is part of that. The good news is that none of the babies have yet been found infected with the AIDS virus. A sub-study has followed their progress. It's added weight to the growing body of evidence that full treatment with ARVs is a highly effective way of stopping babies catching the virus from their mothers.
Yeah, the patient died before.
For many years, there was almost no research in Africa. That has helped to redress this, training young doctors like Dr. Bing.
It opened my eyes to science. I was a doctor who knows how to treat and not to look at other sides of things. And now I've participated in research at the beginning of the whole cascade of treatment and policy. So it's very exciting. And I intend to participate in some more research studies. And hopefully I'll be able to write up my own research and conduct it in Africa to benefit Africans.
With the trial now over, the doctors are very happy with how we have fared. After 5 years, 88% of us are still alive and mostly in very good health. If we had not received ARVs, then only about 1 in 10 of us would still be alive.
So they suspect it's a low CD4 count event, so they report the event.
But while the trial centers are winding down, in London, the statisticians have been working round the clock to analyze all the information. They are excited by what they have found.
Working on this trial has been the most interesting experience I suspect I will ever have. The results are so important for so many millions of people in Africa. This trial was set up to find the best way forward over the next decade. Do we invest resources in expensive routine laboratory testing for everyone, as is done in the developed world, or do we just try to get medicines to more people, particularly in rural areas? Through doing this trial for over 6 years and nearly 3,500 participants, we now have a definitive answer to this question. The key results are that expensive routine laboratory tests, as are done in developed countries, have very little benefit for patients. This was particularly true for the routine tests for side effects, which have no benefit at all. The other type of tests, the CD4 counts used to check the body's defences, also have no effect for the first 2 years on treatment, and it's only after that that they have a small impact, a 3 percentage point difference in survival at 5 years. Now obviously that's not the 0 percentage point difference that we hope for, but it's very close.
I think the most important thing is that the difference is so small, it is only 3%. The study very clearly shows that the best way to use scarce resources is to treat more people rather than spend the money in doing very expensive regular blood tests. Because without treatment, only about 10% would have survived 5 years. With treatment, even without those regular blood tests, 87% have survived. So it's so obvious that the best use of those resources to save as many lives as possible is to put them in to treat as many people as possible.
It's in the village that this will really help, as I saw at this clinic about an hour's drive from Kampala. At present, patients from here have to travel long distances to get their medicines at a center where there are laboratories.
In a community health center like this, after we've trained healthcare workers and we are providing good supervision and support, we are able to provide HIV treatment to many more patients close to where they live.
I'd like to thank you most sincerely for participating.
Before the results are presented internationally, Professor Mjenyi, who runs the center where I received treatment, agreed to tell them to a small group of participants and to Dr. Ben.
According to the results of this study, the answer is yes. We can be able to give treatment to the communities. So we tell our policymakers, please treat all the people, even in rural areas. For AIDS, don't let them die. We can treat them.
Very sick.
But Peter still has a worry. He was in the group that did not see results and was very sick during the trial. He wonders if he took a risk by staying on that.
Participants in this study got better results than those who were receiving treatment under the public sector program. So overall, you were better off in the study on the clinical monitoring arm than in the public sector. This is what it showed.
In fact, the DAT sites have been made local centers of excellence for treatment of AIDS.
Is there any hope that HIV at one day will be put to a halt?
The last question in the meeting is the one that all of us yearn for, the idea of a cure.
That's the justification for research. Research, research, research. To find out more and more information It used to be said it would be impossible to treat AIDS in Africa. We are now treating it even in rural areas. So we cannot say it will be impossible to find a cure. We have to do more research in which volunteers like yourselves will take part. You are partners with scientists that one day will find better ways of treating HIV, if not a cure itself. But as of our present knowledge, we are not yet there now.
For the international presentation of the trial results, I have come to Cape Town, South Africa, for the world's largest academic AIDS conference. But first of all, I have to see the sea. Those are waves. Can you imagine? It's like a hill. I'm wondering. I've never been out of Uganda before, so this is the first time I have ever seen it. The tail up, the tail. 6 years ago, I never thought I would live to see this. The tail.
I have the honor to present the final results of the DART study.
I found the conference overwhelming with hundreds of scientists and doctors. DART is just one of so many clinical trials going on, all of them important. The results presented by Dr. Mujenyi seem to go down well.
So there may be a role for targeted as opposed to routine CD4 monitoring from the second year on ART. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me.
Of course, no one is arguing that we don't need laboratories in Africa. When people are sick, they need tests for diagnosis and treatment. But getting AIDS drugs out to the villages must be the top priority. The last figures showed 3 people a minute are still dying from AIDS in Africa.
The carnage of HIV/AIDS in Africa is continuing because there are still millions of people who are not able to access and benefit from life-saving treatment. The priority for me, and I passionately believe in this, has to be getting the medicines to people and maintaining the supply of medicines. Laboratory services routinely provided have a little benefit, but in terms of the overall impact on communities of keeping people alive, keeping households together, avoiding orphans, the treatment is more important than the laboratory monitoring.
So this is just like a rapid HIV test, but it's a rapid test for CD4. And the idea with this test is that basically you can decide whether you need to start treatment or not.
Something I saw at the conference gave me hope that soon it might be possible to at least do CD4 counts in villages. These tests are still very important to know when people need to start on treatment.
The idea is that you can use them in very rural settings where there's lack of laboratories. And
these tiny CD4 tests are very simple, cost only a few dollars, and can be done almost everywhere. They use a pinprick on the finger, and the results come straight away.
So here in the little window, you can see there are 2 lines, and those 2 lines mean you have enough T cells and you don't need to start treatment.
The results of the DART trial should give a boost to the development of this kind of simple technology. It's now 6 years since the promise of free ARVs for all who need them in Africa. But for many reasons, that is still a distant goal. Today, international money is getting short. I saw this back in Uganda when I went to speak to patients at a clinic in Kampala. This was during a period when US-funded programs like this were told not to take on new patients. This lady tells me that her 2-month-old baby has been able to get treatment as they are still admitting children. But as an adult, there is no place for the mother on the program. She already has herpes, a first sign that AIDS is developing. She says that with no money to buy medicines, she is planning to go back to the village, in which case both her and the baby will be at risk. It makes me very worried. I cannot bear the idea of returning to the days when people were being sent back to the village to die because treatment was too expensive. Once again, I feel lucky. As DAT patients, we not only have better health, but also a commitment for future treatment. When I watch the Independence Day marches, I think of all my country has been through since then. The AIDS epidemic has, for me, been the worst. But you know, AIDS is just caused by a virus. It is a very tricky virus, but it cannot think and learn as we can. This is why research is so important. It is our big advantage, and we have to use it.
Dali watannaba kumufuna fuba nnyo kumwewala endwadde ya mukenenya abange tutte bangi ab'emikwano eŋŋanda n'abakungu owooluganda wulira kye ŋŋamba mukwano fuba nnyo kumwewala
olususu weluyiwa wenna tewefuna olwanga baseka wulira kuswala bali bageya mukwano tobayinze fuba nyokwewala
sirimo bange Galuma